Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Hope you will find in a state of Iman and health. And it was not possible for me for 2 or 3 days to signify and to justify the particular lecture about the remaining series. I try my best to fetch your live chat. But today, art and variety were remaining in our previous lecture, so I am going to start it from here. Notwithstanding the popular view that Shakespeare was an untaught genius, his work evidences an astonishing degree of delightful variety and delicately conceived art. He never presents the scene alive in the work, nor does he ever repeat a set mood or emotions. This diversity marks all his dramatic output. Shakespeare has no fixed formula, but seems to apply to special recipe to every work. Under the surface, there is much carefully wrought art, Zaw and symbolism, thoughts and symbolism, not Zaw. Thoughts and symbolism in his plays, yet all his is managed with a consummate artistic modesty which conceals all outwards traces of arts. That was the last part in our previous activity, and due to some important factor, due to some problem, it was especially about the internet problem and some other sort of I didn't fetch the information. So today we are going to discuss the important parts and factor of the Elizabethan Theatre. Theatre of Elizabethan era, that is a particular scene, and first of all we are going to discuss the Shakespearean or Shakespeare Theatre, and then we will discuss it on a further particular. When drama first rose in England, sometimes in the Middle Ages, plays were generally performed in public places like courtyards of inns. The first building specifically designed for dramatic performances came up in 1560, in 1567, in 1576. Sorry, I'm going to read it now. Performances came up in 1576 and was known as the theatre. It was a royal prerogative to grant a charter to perform a play, but usually permissions was not granted for performances of plays within the city limits, and that is the plays houses were erected outside the city limits across the Thames. In Shakespeare's time, there were probably not more than 5 public theatres in the land, all in London, and they were built according to the design of the inn yards of the period, which had been found marvelously convenient places for the presentation of plays. The theatre was circular or octagonal in shape. The main part of the auditorium was the large round pit open to the sky, in which the poorer people stood. The groundlings encircling this round. The walls were 3 balconies covered on top but not in front, like the stands on a football ground, and containing seats. The price of admission to the pit was 1 penny, and balcony seats ranged from 2 pennies to 2 shillings and 6 pence. 6 pence according to their positions. That was a particular theme and particular sequence of Shakespeare's theatre. Now we are going to talk about the particular stage area. Stage area. The particular stage area and what type of the stage area was at that time. The Elizabethan stage was large, injected far into the pit and did not have scenery. Stage properties were few and the most elementary, hence it made no difference that people stood at the side of the stage as well as in front. The scenery was created in the imagination of the audience by the words of the characters. It was made part of play so as not to obtrude and destroy the illusions of reality. That is why Shakespeare's play makes such excellent radio broadcast. As one listens in one's armchair, one has no scenery. This is in the words of the play, and so is created in one's mind. The number of scenes in a play did not matter when the stage was without scenery. Consequently, a succession of short scenes is quite common in Elizabethan drama. So today audiences would become impatient at the constant delays if every scene involves shifting of scenery and properties. Now we are going to discuss some important effects of the play, some important enthusiasm and some important amusements of the play. The Elizabethan stage significantly affected the plays of the period because many themes which can now be indicated by stage contrivances had then to be managed through the text of play itself. Shakespeare's play did not originally have any scene divisions, but this is immaterial. This is immaterial since what we now regard as scenes were there. Pardon me. As scenes were then acted continuously and there was no scenery on the stage to create a discordant effect. Most Shakespearean plays are a succession of a short discordant effect. Most Shakespearean plays are a succession of short scenes. Also, some, like the Winter's Tale, are different in the respect. The large number of scenes would prove bothersome to modern producers who would have to shift the scenery, which would cause intolerable delays. But there was no such problem for the Elizabethan, since there was no curtains. It indicates the ending of a scene. This was frequently done by the use of running lines. This, however, was not invariable for in some of Shakespeare's plays. For example, the Winter's Tale, the speeches themselves indicate the ending of the scene, just as the scenery had to be put into the play. So, had entrance and existed to be arranged as part of the play. Today, an actor can get into positions before the rise of the curtain, but on the open stage, it would seem artificial if an actor walked on and then started his part or finished the scene and then walked off. Such ending as Act 1, Scene 2 comes away. Act 2, Scene 1 come follow us. Act 3, Scene 1 go fresh horses. Scene 2 come and let. I will definitely explain when I will give you the complete clinical summary of Othello. We will particularly discuss all these in particular manners, inshallah. So just line down and just underline all these important evidences. Stage and the pardon me, come and lead me to these sorrows. Clear the stage and the same time fit in perfectly naturally with the play. It follows that dead bodies always had to be carried off the stage. It was not unknown for the stage floor to be equipped with a trap door for the sudden appearance and disappearance of ghosts and spirits. Now we are going to the next important factor, and that is recess and balconies. Whether during stage play and during their theatre work or during their theatre performances, what type of the gadgets and what type of recession was available at that time. So we are going to discuss it. The Shakespearean stage had recess at its back, which would be used for parts of scenes which now carry the stage directions within. The recess would no doubt contain such object as the statue of Hermione, the stage directions at the beginning of the scene in the Winter's Tale, Act 5, Scene 3, says that the statue is curtained, and later we are told that Paulina draws back a curtain and discovers Hermione stands like a statue. Hermione was evidently standing on a pedestal. Above the recess was a balcony which served for castle walls and upper room and such like scenes. It appears that this too could be curtained off, judging from the way opportunities are made for balcony scenes in Elizabethan plays. People were very fond of them, particularly when there was an escape from the balcony and upper room, for example, into the main stage, representing the ground below. The young bloods of the day who fancied themselves actually hired schools around the stage itself. It was a source of continual annoyance to playwrights that actor gauged in order to please these aristocratic playgoers, and we find Shakespeare expressing his resentment against such androgynes through the advice which Hamlet offered to the player's king. In Shakespeare's time, acting was confined. We are going to discuss actors and acting procedure at that time during the Elizabethan Age. In Shakespeare's time, acting was confined to men, since there was law which forbade women to act. Women's part had therefore to be played by boys or adolescents whose voices had not yet broken today. Of course, it is funny to imagine Cleopatra, Juliet, Lady Macbeth, or Hermione being played by a boy. It may be noted, however, that in Shakespeare's play, especially in interesting devices is used which minimize the difficulty caused by female parts being played by males. Repeatedly in the comedies, especially girls are often required to disguise themselves as men. For example, in As You Like It, so that if the actor playing with the part, say of Celia, looked to be more a young man than a young lady, then instead of affecting credibility, it only added to the success of the part. For the male disguise was to be regarded as so much the more successful. This is not only made it easier for procedure, but confronted the audience with that interesting situation of a character pretending to be what he was in reality. Now, after acting and after actors and acting positions and their particular phenomena, we are going to discuss that what type of costumes and settings were available in Elizabethan theatre. For the most part, characters appeared in the fashionable dress of the day and made little attempts to make their costume conform to the period being depicted in the play. However, they were often extremely lavish, and it might cause the actor playing the part of a king or prince quite a fortune to have his costume, which often belonged to him. A prepared setting was sometimes indicated by play cards, but generally there was little necessity of doing so. Since the setting were usually vividly brought out in the speeches of the characters. Now that is a very little part, and we will also explain it because that was not too much necessary important matter or material according to the. So we will particularly discuss it. And now we are going to discuss the mutual suitability. The mutual suitability, that is another important factor. By modern standards, the Elizabethan stage may be said to have been almost bare. This was by no means a great handicap for this bare Elizabethan stages was wonderfully well suited to the play of the period, in which beautiful poetry often made stage properties or sceneries quite superfluous. The stage of the day provided the necessary degree of flexibility which the plays required. It is interesting to note the degree of flexibility which the plays required. It is interesting to note that even with all the resources at their command, many modern directors choose to approximate more or less to the barons of the Elizabethan stage with more or less continuous scenes because they find it better suited to the genius of Shakespearean plays. On the other hand, some of the impact of Shakespearean drama is always lost when the production is over elaborated. Shakespearean's audience, that was the basic important factor at that time, and we are going to have an overlook, and we are going to have an overview of it. Shakespeare's audience, heterogeneous one, and one of Shakespeare's eminent success was in training such a mixed audience, made it suspend its prejudice, preconceptions, and ingrained attitudes in the presence of great and beauty. This still remains a hallmark of Shakespeare's drama, for it can still be successfully performed before audience. Comparison, the most learned and the most ignorant, the most critical, as well as the most naive, and never fails to delight any of them. In actual fact, Shakespeare's audience was not drawn from the lowest dregs of society, as Robert Bridges maintained, but encompassed a wide spectrum of Elizabethan life, from the Queen herself at court and the upper class gentry at Blackfriars to the many elements of the ordinary London population who came to the public playhouses. It is highly like the Elizabethan audiences were much more demonstrative than those of our own days, weeping unashamedly at scenes of pathos and laughing unrestrainedly at comedy, and showing their desires with hisses and catcalls. In other respects, there is no reason to believe that they differed greatly from the audience of present day theatres and cinema houses. So we can also say Shakespeare's audience, Shakespeare's stage and Shakespeare's acting, Shakespeare's costumes, Shakespeare's theatre as the torch bearer to the modern eras and some important levels and some important aspects of the Elizabethan age. That is also the second part of my this particular lecture. Nomenclature, the term the Elizabethan age is a very vague and flexible one. Strictly speaking, it may be said to be even misleading. Also, titles like Jacobean age are also frequently used in literary criticism. The general practice is to regard the entire period from 1580 to 1660 as the Elizabethan age, in spite of the fact that Queen Elizabeth reigned only during a small part of it. If we were to adhere strictly to historical dates, then the only two writers who are really and completely Elizabethan are Marlowe and Spencer. The writer of it or underline it. Yet in spirit, the work of writers like Milton and Browning is akin to that of the Elizabethans, and they are therefore referred to as Elizabethan writers. As Sainsbury reminds us, let me just take a pause, reminds us all the seed of the whole period called Elizabethan was sown, and not a little of it had come before the Queen's death. And secondly, the quality of the period 1580 to 1660 is essentially one and indivisible. This usage has the advantages of keeping both sets of facts in view, and especially of directions and attentions to the characteristics of the first generation of the period, the generation which, as typified by Spencer ended a little before the last day of Elizabeth's own life closed. The Renaissance, an important part, an important figure, and important aspect. The Renaissance, the most important influence on the Elizabethan age was that of the Renaissance. This was felt in England considerably later than over the continent, because it in fact traveled through Germany, Italy and France to reach this country. Margaret Shakespeare wrote, when the impact of the Renaissance was at its height, and the same is true of Spencer is so far as poetry is concerned. The most important aspect of the Renaissance was the liberation of the human spirit from the beginning, from the binding restraints of the Middle Ages. Wonder and curiosity, which are the essentials of Romanticism, were reawakened. There was a keen interest in classical literature, to the extent that classical legends became popularly known, and in Shakespeare's play, even persons from lower life often make allusions to them. The Renaissance was humanistic in its trend, and this humanism is an important characteristic of the literature of the day. The Renaissance had its own code of values. One of them was the concept of justly earning glorious fame, and we find that this is the ideal from which the heroes of Elizabethan literature, whether in prose or drama, strike. The most outstanding example of this is, of course, the lust of the Marlowean hero to achieve the impossible. Renaissance writers achieve the impossible. Renaissance writers placed before them the ideal of the completed man, whereas the Renaissance encouraged the love of beauty. Balancing influence was exercised by the Reformation, which encouraged the pursuit of virtue and righteousness. Another aspect of the age, social and political background. By and large, the Elizabethan age was one of the peace, but it was not the type of peace which produced Complacency or causes, we can say it easiness. Complacency, the easiness, or cause stagnation. This was caused by the fact that especially during the reign of Elizabeth I, there were constant threats of invasions from abroad. The reason for this was commercial rivalry, especially in exploiting nearly discovered colonies, and the main enemy England had to fear was Spain. English sea captains were able to blunt the Spanish force by destroying their formidable armada. Later, there was another factor which tended to produce a feeling of insecurity, or at last aroused a fear that anarchy might follow the death of the queen. These fears were, of course, to prove completely unjustified. The Elizabethan age was one in which the nation made great economic strides. Trading settlements were founded abroad, including the famous East India Company. Curiously enough, even the Reformation led to great economic competition by encouraging the idea of thrift and by relating worldly prosperity to divine favor. One of immediate phenomena of the age was the rise of Puritanism, especially in its frantic and often hypocritical form. Style at the expense of the Puritans is a recurrent feature of Elizabethan literature. Now we all discuss it in poetic sense. We all discuss in poetic or in discussing poetry view, in discussing the poet's elements and poet's particular sequence or sequence of particular poetry. Now we are going to discuss Elizabethan prose. That is an important factor and important aspect of that era, and we are going to discuss it. Elizabethan prose. We have two more important aspects. The Elizabethan age is in literature is famous primarily for its poetry, whether dramatic or non-dramatic, but its achievement in prose, although less spectacular, is by no means negligible. The age produced many great prose writers, including Bacon at Sir Francis, asking what Sir Francis Bacon. Bacon at one end and Browning at the other. It is true, however, that no single prose writer of the time holds the same rank in prose that Spenser's hold in poetry. Perhaps indeed no single writer, not even Dryden, even has held that rank for prose. The lower and less intense harmony is the more varied, and indefinitely adjustable instrument for prose. Adjustable instrument, and while it is conceivable that one did indeed Shakespeare has very nearly done so, should catch up and utter in hint and intimations at least the whole sum of poetry. No one could do the like in prose. Here too, the comparative newness of the form had its inevitable effect. Even the period of sheer experiment and exploration was not over when the 16th century ended. Very great advances had been made in both, and above all, the antinomy of prose, the opposition of the plain and ornate style, which was to dominate the rest of its history, was for the first time clearly posed and definitely worked out on either side. This would not have happened in the earlier period of mere or main translation. As regards the subjects of tentative accommodation of vocabulary and experimental adaptation of arrangement, Elizabethan poetry, after prose we are going to discuss it. Elizabethan poetry, also the drama of the age, is predominantly poetic. There was also a considerable amount of non-dramatic poetry, even by dramatists like Shakespeare and nuances. The representative poet of the age, however, is Spenser. His contribution to English poetry cannot be overestimated. His greatness as a poet does not depend entirely on the high estimation which the writers and readers of the day placed on the fairy queen. In fact, so far as Spenser's epics is concerned, it had some detractors also. All the same, it is indisputable that Spenser practically created the diction and prosody of English poetry, as both have subsisted in the main to the present day. He did not, of course, finish the creation. Shakespeare had to come and Milton at least before that was done. But he did a great deal more than begin it. His versification had to receive not a little extension and became an infinite process. Spenser is often called the poet's poet, and the compliment is not an appropriate one for his influence on the poets both of his own age and of succeeding ages was considerable skill. Even though Shakespeare's major output was dramatic, the impact of his poetry also was tremendous. Elizabethan drama, the Elizabethan Age, was and continues to be the most glorious period. Now we are going to discuss that in Elizabethan drama, what was the sheet and what was the contribute of Shakespeare along with others. Which English drama has ever seen. The achievement of the age in this respect was unique, for it was neither in the realm of reconstruction and recovery nor of orderly extension, but really of innovation and even invention. 3 entire centuries have failed to produce any new really fertile prose or to import in conditions suitable to the climate any foreign form capable of standing comparison with the Elizabethan play, which shoot itself into shape comparison with the Elizabethan play, which shoot itself into shape 100 minor hands besides those of Marlowe and Shakespeare's, aiding by the date of the production of every man in his humor. The typical Elizabethan dramatist does not attempt to isolate action or situations merely. His play is but a piece of the life of the actors. Their life is but a piece of larger and ever larger lives. Nothing is superfluous, irrelevant, common, and unclean. Everything may and shall go. The intense nature of interest of tragedy may give to the working of tragedy plays a closer unity than that of comic. The majesty or the pathos of some particular characters may dwarf in presentation as in attention the episodes and the interludes, but the principle is always the same. The final concept and the final judgment about Elizabethan theatre companies, that is also important fact, because when in my first lecture I told you Sigma about Aftab Iqbal, and I give you a particular notion about Aftab Iqbal as he has made his own production company, and same matter we are going to discuss, which proved Shakespeare mighty one. Pardon me. The first public playing places in London were the inns. The first recorded performances being in 1557, the boards Act. Elegate. I'll be there in 2 minutes. The first public playing places in London were the inns. The first recorded performances being in 1557, 1567 as the Boers had undergate and the Saracens had Islington permanent theatres were built in areas outside the city jurisdiction because of the strict city regulations of 1574. The first two public theatres, James Bargate's Theatre and Henry Lenneman's Curtain, were built in the liberties on the north bank of the Thames in 1576, as was the first private theatre. Richard Farren's Blackfriars till 1608. No adult company normally played in a private theatre, but the King's men took over the Blackfriars in the years of the many children's companies in the Elizabethan and Jacobean period. The two most dominant were the children of St. Paul's and the children of Chapel Royal. Elizabethan actors sought the patronage of some noblemen as much for the prestige as a protection against the harsh laws related to the theatrical profession. Also, a company adopted the livery of its as patron. In other ways, it was left to seek its own fortunes. One of the best known companies was the Chamberlain King's Men, to which Shakespeare himself belonged. The leading dramatists were attached more or less permanently to some theatres companies and were therefore familiar with the talent of the actors for whom they created roles. The women's part were of course played by boys throughout the Elizabethan age. So these were the important names of the theatre companies. So I am going to conclude, but sorry, because it is written for me. So we are going to end up the lecture here. So let me go now, and if anyone of you is searching for Urdu lecture for BS Urdu, you can also subscribe Moorish Urdu Professor MA Raza by writing Urdu by using Urdu keyboard. And at the end, I request you don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. So let me go now and say with me, do something more for humanity, do something more for knowledge and practices. Have a good day.